You know the way you get an invitation to do something, sorry Mary, you get an invitation to do something and you say, oh God, yeah, that'd be lovely, yeah, I'll do that, and you think it's going to be lovely, and then you wake up in the morning and you say, in the name of God, what possessed me to do that thing? I must have been out of my mind. So in my mind or not, here I am. I'm a kind of an accidental oral historian, because really what I like is people's stories. Do you know the stories people have, what they can tell me? And oral historians have a whole load of rules and regulations and things, and I kind of just go along with my camera and sit down and say, tell me. And they do, mostly. So, Cormac, thank you for the invitation. I thank you a lot more heartfeltedly in a couple of hours' time. But I have to tell you, it actually is, the work of oral history is great work. It really is great work, because we are the first generation who can record. Think of what you have seen of filming 50 years ago, 100 years ago. The equipment took lorries, do you know? And the storage of the recorded material took huge spaces, and it deteriorated very rapidly. If you look at an old film, it's all sort of splashy, black and spotty. Whereas nowadays, with your iPhone, you can do a really good recording, both visual and oral, and it can be stored on a little chip. So we are the first generation that can actually record stories easily, and that's why it's good work. We should do it. We really should do it. In every parish in the country, I don't know if any of you, some of you will probably have seen a series called Clare, The Men of Ventry, which I did maybe 2 years ago. And it was very well liked. But every parish in the country has a story. Every single parish. Now, a lot of them, they're kind of similar. But every parish, all the same, is unique. And if you take that parish and look at it, it has its own story to tell, going back to the early Norman times, because it was the Normans who created the parishes. And therefore odd things happen. Like, for example, I come from the parish of Ventry near Dingle, and the patron saint of Ventry is St. Catherine. St. Catherine of Alexandria in Egypt. And that parish was named by the Geraldines, the Knights of Kerry. And they had people in the Crusades. And on the Crusades they had learnt about the saints of the Middle East. And that's how, say, St. Catherine of Egypt, St. Barbara, St. George, that's how all those saints came to these parts of the world. They came back from the Crusades. So that's how far back these simple little things go. Anyway, also, I think it's important is don't forget the contemporary. Don't forget what's happening now. Sometimes we get so excited about going to old people before they die that we forget what's happening now. What's happening now is actually also very interesting. And the thing that's recorded when it's happening has a vitality of its own. You know, for example, I don't think I have time to show you tonight, but there's a guy who moved into Ventry because you think you've a load of blow-ins in chair, you don't know nothing about blow-ins. Kerry is crawling with them. More than half the population of Ventry is blow-in, and one of them lives in a caravan park over near Coan Pier and is a sculptor. And a couple of years ago we were involved in a project called Men of Ventry, as I was speaking about earlier, and he made a sculpture of the parish. And it was lovely because Ventry is a little roundy little parish surrounded by hills, you can see at the opening. And he visualised the parish as an egg. And he scooped out the shell of the egg and he projected a Google Earth map of Ventry Parish onto the inside of it, and it was gorgeous, and it is gorgeous. But we recorded that as it was happening. And you know, don't forget the contemporary when you're recording. Don't forget, for example, do you have anything for St. John's Eve, for Midsummer's Night?
Yes.
Yeah, well, record it. As it's happening, record it. Do you have anything for Lord Brenda?
Yes.
In various places. Yeah, well, we have.
St. Bridget's Well.
Yeah, St. Bridget's Well, and all that kind of thing is coming up. Catch that as it's going. Because if you catch it every year, you'll see that tradition continues and shows itself a little bit differently all the time as it goes on. So, what am I going to talk about? Well, I'm going to talk about early memories. I'm going to talk about school, not as much as I was going to because technology is not our friend. I'm going to talk about significant events. I'm going to talk about matchmaking and marriage. I'm going to talk about magic, faith and prayer. And if we get that far, I'd say we'll be doing well. But if we don't do too well on all those, we will talk about health and cures, and we talk about aging, which is not a new problem. We all think that we live in a youth culture, and that was only the other day that people started worrying about aging, but actually that's not very true. So anyway, these are the themes I picked out. At the end of the day, this morning when I was picking out these themes, I said, God, if I was doing it again, I'd do a whole other set of themes. And one of them that came to my mind was how families are named. Do you know the way in Clare there's a load of McMahons? So how do you know one McMahon from another?
The nickname.
The nicknames. Or the family names. We'll say Paddy Jack. Or whatever. But you also have interesting nicknames, and it'll be very interesting to pick up the nicknames and to find where they came from. Now, I don't know in Dingle, in Dingle it could be offensive to use nicknames to the person's face. You used them when you were talking about them, but you didn't actually use their nicknames in front of them. And my father had a very good friend with whom he was in the army, who was known to all and sundry as Tomás a Futta. I do not know what the Futta was, but he was known as Tomás a Futta. And so, one day when I was maybe 4, this man came to visit. And I was a child, and when you were a child in those days, you were not introduced to adult visitors. You were expected to go away and mind your own business. But I was trying to identify this stranger. And I was listening and listening. And after a while, I put 2 and 2 together, and I said, oh, you're Tomás a Futta. And my father was infuriated. It was appalling you to call poor man Tomás a Futta to his face. But that's something you should all record. Whose name is what, and why is it that? Why is it that? Anyway, actually, I want people here to start talking now. So I want somebody to tell me of a nickname that they know, or that they are known by. Is there anybody here whose family is...
Solus.
What?
Solus.
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 Why?
Well, I suppose he was always bright and cheerful, and he was fantastic concertina player. And maybe that was why. He was always happy and smiling, and he was known as Solus. Right.
And who was he?
Solus Lillis from Cuimhneamh.
From Cuimhneamh. This woman here from Cuimhneamh. Do you know her?
Yep. Stack Ryan. Why Stack? I don't know why.
Oh, Stack Ryan.
Huh?
Stack Ryan.
You stand a great musician as well. He taught all the children and musicians in the neighbourhood.
What was the name?
Stack Ryan.
Stack Ryan. And why was he Stack?
Why was he stacked?
Oh, I don't know.
I come from Clare.
What about you?
been fascinated by GAA nicknames, and particularly over the years. Like, we've had a lot of them in Clare, but some of them now come to mind. Sean and Taoiseach, Lynch, Nick Jazzer, etc. Why he was called Jazzer, I don't know. Happy Fagan and Cronin.
Oh, hello, Patsy Fagan.
Must be.
Yeah.
Must be. There's just a few of them. There's hundreds of them.
Write them down. Write them down and write down who they were. Patsy Fagan is definitely. Who remembers? My father used to sing "Hello, Patsy Fagan" in the apple of my eye. Hello, Patsy Fagan. Here the girls all cry.
We always thought it was Charles Dickens, or Charles Dickens' book. We don't know that, right?
Yeah. But anyway, I'm going to start at the very beginning. And I'm going to ask you all a question, which we won't answer now. We'll come to the answer later. I want you all to think of your earliest memory. What's the first thing you can remember? And I leave the question with you. We'll come back to it later. Now, try to remember the very first thing that came into your head. Because the first thing that came into your head and the thing you're going to say might be two different things. Do you know? But try to remember the first thing that came into your head. You don't have to say it, but do try to remember it. And now I'm going to start with an early memory from Clare. I think this is one of the best stories I have ever heard in my whole life. It's a great story.
Yes, I was born on the 22nd of September 1929. And it was a very traumatic event, because my mother was in labour for 3 days, and in the end I was pulled out with forceps and I was dead. I was thrown under the bed. And in those days the beds there were timber beds, and they had curtains all around the bed to hide the chamber pot underneath. It was a frilly curtain, so there's where I ended up. Two ladies in the neighbourhood, one was Bridgie and the other one was Bid, and Bid was unmarried, and they pulled me out from under the bed. They put me up on the round table. The bed was in the parlour behind the fire, by the way, and they put me up on the table, and Bid, the unmarried lady, got the bottle of whiskey, which was meant for the doctor, and she poured a tablespoon of whiskey from the bottle, and she put it down my throat, and the other woman, Bridgie, said, "For the land's sake, Bid, you killed the child. But the poor is dead anyway, we might as well finish him off." And of course I coughed and I spluttered and I came to life.
My goodness.
And Bid used to say to me after, I used to tease Bid and say, for fun she would say, "You black devil, why did they leave you under the bed when you were there turning to me like this?"
And who were these Bid? Who was Bid?
Well, she was Bid Egan. She was from over the road here.
And was she a recognised midwife? Sort of?
Not at all, they were just local women.
But they were coming as midwives.
They went round as they were the ladies who delivered the babies, but they couldn't get me out, so the doctor had to come. So I was there. My mother was for 3 days in labour. The children, the local children, did not go to school for 3 days. They were walking back and forth in front of the house all day long, saying roses from my mother.
For the 3 days?
Yes, for the 3 days, yes. And then they time off school.
And how was your mother after?
She was fine, she recovered and she was fine, but honestly she must have been very weak after all that. But I ended up with, I still have indentations here in my skull where the forceps went in. And when I went down, I was taken down very, very rapidly in a horse and cotton car to be baptised. And it was Mrs. Brenda who was there at the time, Tom Pender's wife. They were the clerks of the church. And he was a car worship man. And so she got the cloth of the linen off the altar, and she said, Mass was celebrated over this morning, and I wrapped the child's head in it. And it was Father Michael Madden who baptized me, and he said, it is September, I call him Michael Joseph, he'll be in heaven before me, that's my name. And they thought I would live to get back home. Here I am, and I should be 83 in 6 weeks' time.
Isn't that just a fantastic story?
Well, isn't it? If you listen to that story with the eyes of 100 years' time, all the things that can be got out of it. The bed. Now the bed, the curtains were to cover the pole. They were also to cover a whole lot of other things, including mice and very possibly rats. You know, there's so much to be got out of that, but it's so beautifully told. I can realize it with you, but it's the best story.
It is all on your cutter's form.
That's what it is. That's you. Anyway, I now want to go on to something. I'm going to show you two little clips. I'm going to show you two little clips of what I call a creation myth. Now, the younger ones among you, now, Katie, didn't you always know where babies came from? Didn't you always know where babies came from? Pretty much. Yeah, she says, of course she did. Let me tell you, when I was 11, I didn't. And neither did any of the other people sitting around me. They did not know where babies came from. What I was told was that I came in with the tide. And my father found me at top tide and brought me home. So I call these creation myths. And I'm going to show you two, and then I'm going to ask you to tell me some of your own creation myths. No, we haven't, that's not it. It's
4810, sorry.
It's 4810 on Brenda disc.
Yep. Brenda disc, 4809. Oh, it's big, that's hanging out.
Sorry, Sean, it's there you go.
Yeah, next second. Okay.
Sorry, yeah. Okay.
The profile nation.
No, back it in. Back it in. This is Patsy Fagan.
Sorry,
Yeah, okay, go from there. So, obviously in West Clare, people could come in with the tide. Did they? Did they? Where did you come from?
Under a cabbage.
You were under cabbage, were you? Your father found you, or your mother?
My still my father.
Yeah, my father found me as well. Is that interesting? So where were you found? Where were you found?
Wasn't that? Oh, I was taken out of the river by a water dog.
Is that it? This was in this water. Where were you found?
The dungeon or in a suitcase. Oh, Margaret.
What are you, Pat?
Under the head of cabbage.
Under the head of cabbage. And you?
In the bog,
In the bog. In the bog hole. And who found you?
in the water.
Man. What else? You were the cabbage. So obviously, you see, because you weren't near the sea. If you were near the sea was really handy. My father was down the beach looking for rack. Rack was wood that washed in with the sea. And the thing with rack was, if you pulled it up past the high water mark, then it was yours. Nobody else could take it. And there is rack now too, because I walk the beach every day, but it's mostly plastic and rubbish that will never degrade. But in those days it was mostly timber, and they loved these big blocks of timber. If you could pull it up past high water mark, then the neighbours wouldn't take it. Okay, and you see, every part of the country will have their own creation method. The cabbage leaf is very common. Cabbage is very common. Water is very common. It was pulled out of the river by a water dog. Imagine that. And is that what you called water dogs? Otters. They were called water
Yes,
dogs.
I call them water dogs, they were ushers, yes.
Because you see, in Irish the word is madarishke.
Motherishkin.
So it's obviously, it's not so long since Clare spoke Irish.
Yes, that's
And
right.
so it was a water dog. And then there were other memories. I have 3 different people who remember Lindbergh. Remember the first solo flight? And I have 3 different people. Have we got that? It's 1:15.
Just want to introduce the newspaper there.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so they,
Okay.
I suppose, being a Dassenberry, it's been a long Lindbergh after the show, Washington, the children, so they were laying around in the school, connected, and over the road, the station, the ocean, the shop, and the trick, and then the whole market, that's your figure, and the younger, and the right to the
I have 3 different people. She was at school. Another old man was coming from the strand with a load of sand. Now again, that's a thing that's gone. Nobody does that anymore. But in the old days they would bring sand to spread on the land for whatever good it would probably lighten the soil or something. And the third fellow was at hay. So they were obviously older than she was when they had left school. But Lindbergh flew over the Dingle Peninsula and then went on a little bit north of Southern Ireland, but it was a wonderful thing. And then I think we have here, one of your clips is about a woman who saw her first airplane.
yeah.
Do you remember the first time that you saw or heard an airplane?
I do.
Can you tell me about that?
I was sending to Scariff for messages, and of course I didn't even have a bicycle at the time. I was just walking into Scariff I was. And you know, where the river is running down there, past, you know, where Land/Where lives.
Yes, of course.
I was coming down along there, I remember, on my own, and I heard this terrible noise. And I thought first the car was coming behind me, and I was looking to see it, or a lorry or something. And I was looking all the time behind me to see what was going to come. Never thinking of looking up in the air, you know. And there was nothing coming, and the noise was getting ferocious, and I said, oh, God, what is it, you know. And when I finished and I looked up in the air, and there I saw an airplane. Well, I couldn't believe my eyes. I was talking to myself from that until I went into Scariff. What in the name of God was it? And how was it staying above in the sky? And when I got into Scariff, everyone were out in Scariff, and they had notebooks and they're trying to take the number of the plane. It was that low, and they're trying to take the number of the plane, and what, you know. It was a real you know, just something that was never heard of before, kind of.
And had you even heard of the plane before that?
I mustn't have, because I never, it was the last place on earth I thought to look was low up in the sky. I even got up on the side of the fence and looked into the water to see was it something was coming down the river. I couldn't believe my eyes that it was up in the sky. For a finish, I looked up in the sky and I saw the plane.
And did you get a prize?
Well, I did, because I didn't know, might it come down or was it safe to let hold at all? And I was on my own.
And the people in this car were out when you
They were all out looking up at the plane when I got into it. I think I ran it from where I was from that to get in to see what was taking place at all, or was it going to land in Scariff us?
And how old were you at that time, Margaret?
I'd say I was about maybe 12 or 13.
So that would have been, I suppose, the 1930s, the early 1930s.
That's again, yeah. That's again.
Now, you see, nowadays, that's not so surprising to us. It's not really, because we all know that aeroplanes kind of came about in the last 100 years. But take it 100 years' time, that would be absolutely astonishing. Absolutely astonishing. That somebody saw the first airplane and that it's recorded in our own words and in our own voice. Now, personally, I think it's much more powerful if it's visual. And that's something that I want to say to people here who are recording. You can do quite good recordings with cheap equipment. You can do a very good recording with your iPhone. A very good recording. We're not talking here about going in for an Oscar. You know, we're only talking about getting the thing on record. And if you see the person who's talking, it's a lot more powerful than hearing it. Even though hearing is wonderful, it's still a lot more powerful. You can see. You can do it with, if you have a cheap camera, with a cheap SLR camera, just set it with the person. It doesn't matter if the camera shakes. It doesn't matter if it's not visually perfect. You can see the person who's talking to you, which is really nice. Now, every now and then, if you are recording stuff, things will catch you by surprise. And now we're going on with Brenda Disc from where we were. Just continue. So it's 1:45. Things will catch you by surprise. Things will come up in an interview that you don't expect. And this I want to show you. Yeah, there we go. Okay. Come up in a minute.
A picharote me gel și că da ni corpei ni știa că conta foaia era ni ia pe mahnia frumos ne se mai am finish da la da și ne și mahnia mai ne da cu han nu so să sto na la și oh ta că mai era să chilena a crime că la ce de mahnia mor că la ce au sus agus beanú chudam ó bhhaile chuig go dóg sí nád na bacranne agus bhí an chu daoine istí sa tíis a ní chuine an taspa di néchar a tsun. No.
See, I didn't know that. And yet, it's a lovely story, isn't it? It's a sad story. It wasn't really sad for her because she never knew her father. And so she grew up before the pain hit her, you know what I mean? There was no pain in it. But imagine the time, honestly. They heard that the body was washed ashore in County Clare. But there was no system at the time. They couldn't identify it. And those poor people, broken people, they never knew what happened to their child. Now, one of the things that happens, and I think it's lovely when you collect oral histories, is how stories get put together. I once had the privilege of going to America to to speak to women who had left West Kerry in the late 40s, early 50s of the last century. And one of them was the daughter of Paddy Welsh, who was mentioned there in that clip. And he was also found. And she was 10 years old when he drowned. And he just didn't come home that night. But that happened fairly regularly with fishermen. They didn't panic. They didn't panic. And they went off to school. And when she got to the school wasn't open and all the children were sitting on the wall looking out to sea. So the teacher had obviously gone to do something to do with drowning. And she spoke about all of that. And we had the story from this woman that this was another one of the three men who had drowned. And he was found. So 6 weeks later, somebody went for a load of sand, as I said earlier, to the beach in Maria. And what should he find as he was shoveling the sand? What fell out of it? But a pipe. And the pipe was Paddy Welsh's. And his daughter still has that pipe. She's in America now, but she still has that pipe. And she says she knows it because he carved his initials into it. P.L. Paddy Lee. This is his name, Paddy Welsh. And she said 6 weeks later, that washed up on the beach in Cuimhneamh. So you put things together from this person's story and that person's story, and things actually become clearer, and you get a kind of picture of what life is like. And it was actually very hard. You know, we're so worried now. And so many people are worried with good reason because they have these enormous mortgages and they have these enormous debts. And they really feel they're up against the wall. Actually, they're not. Do you know, life goes on. Debt or no debt, life goes on. Things like this have happened before. Just get on with it. Go from day to day. Do what you can. There's worse things than that. We are that. But we don't. This is what collecting oral history does for us. Do you know the way we say Shannon and the old things we heard long ago? Do you know what they tell us? They tell us, you're not the first, and you won't be the last. And people have been here before and survived this. And you know that can be encouraging. It's a pity today that our culture is so homogeneous. It's all coming from screens. You know, and you're looking at your iPad and you're looking at your iPhone and you're looking at the television, you're looking at all these things. And somehow they're all very homogeneous. And the other and the worst is that we can be manipulated by those screens without actually realizing it. Do you know, we have no control over the people who put that stuff out. Whereas if we go back to our history and heritage, we kind of know the people who produced that. And we know that there is a truth in that we can have no certainty about in all these screens that are looking at us. So that's why what people do when they collect oral history is they leave something there that we can look at and that can and might be of help to future generations. Anyway, there are loads of other household memories. So I'm now going to go and ask you what your earliest memories are. No, we start with the youngest person here. Katie, what's your earliest memory?
My old friend.
What?
I call up my old friend.
I say you were very young. What did you say, Jackie?
I cried.
Do you remember why you did it?
I did it because I went to hear my mom, and I said this is crazy, and she said yes.
See. What's your earliest Only a man. Kicking a ball. Now, do you know, isn't that interesting? I don't know if any of the other mothers here have observed. If you give a little girl a ball, she'll throw it. But if you give a little boy a ball, he'll kick it. Isn't that a fact? That's it. That's not. I mean, I was a school principal for years, and I saw that little girls' instinct is to throw the ball. That's why they play basketball so well, or volleyball, or those things. Football, I don't think they do. And who are you kicking the ball with? You can't remember that, but you just remember kicking the ball. And you still follow football. There you go. What's your earliest memory?
I was thinking that. That was in the easiest little thing.
You can take it good and well. You're thinking what to tell me. So what are you going to tell me?
I remember my first day going to school.
Tell me.
But I wanted to go, I walked to school when I was going to do London National School. And I knew the road that the car used to go, not the road that we had to walk. And I stood at the cross and had an argument with my brother and the neighbours to stop me from going that way. And that was about 4 years later. I remember that statement, and I was very upset that I couldn't go the way I wanted to go.
Lovely manners.
It was very tall.
He seemed very loud. But I have a lot of more memories like that I love to remember.
Yes.
I remember the night Dr. Bill was first elected to the Dáil in 1969.
Yes. That was a great celebration.
So we were taken out of the bed at 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock in the night, and the neighbour, Tom Rose, had an old prefect car, and he brought us the speaker. And I remember getting a sandwich with something in it, the taste is still in my mouth. It was 1969. It was relish, I think. And I didn't know what relish was, but I knew the taste. I can still taste it.
Fantastic. And there's an interesting thing about the senses. That he remembers the taste. Who remembers the smell?
That's the pub as a judge.
What?
Yes, that's the pub in the place.
I worked in a pub, to make a few pub. Well, there is nothing, and of course, the smoking in those days, there is nothing more foul than the smell of a pub in the morning. Oh my God. The smell of the pub in the morning was disgusting. And what happened with this pub? No sooner had I opened up and cleaned it up, that this man used to come in and sit at the corner of the bar and have a glass of Guinness, and he ordered the jar of little onions. He was kicking down the bar. Oh, now. Smell.
The smell of a goose cooking.
And fill the house.
Yeah.
Now, do you remember plucking the goose?
Yes, I do.
Now, tell us about plucking a goose.
How can I tell you?
Tell them what it was like to pluck it. See, hands up to people who've never plucked a bird in their lives. Look at it. See, most of them never plucked a bird in their whole lives. Tell them.
The goose was held between the legs.
Yes.
And you held on to the legs. And the pluck, well, this was now when they were getting the down.
Yes.
It's a live goose. During, the feathers were valuable.
They were.
Sell them. And at a certain period, I suppose in September or sometime like that, and all the little pin feathers were down like, they were plucked, dry, and the goose was held between the legs and the head, and just the soft down feathers were picked up, put into the bag, and the feather number would come and buy them.
And the goose is still alive.
Well,
Oh, sure, and we'll get off to roll for more.
They would
Yeah, it would be done again. Now,
Like thinning them out.
I remember plucking a goose once with my father. We,
I
Christmas
never
Eve.
took the goose, but I saw them.
Well, I was with my father, right? I was very, very small. My father was plucking the goose really but I was there. And when you have plucked goose, now there's a way to pluck a bird. You have to go with, you can't pluck them that way, if you know what I mean.
Yes.
You have to go with the direction of the feathers. But when you plucking a chicken, you just pluck the chicken, that's the end of it, so it's plucked. But with a goose, when you've plucked the feathers, that thing that Mary's talking about, the down, is still left. And what we used to do was burn that off. We didn't have feathermongers coming. We just singed it off, just literally light some straw underneath it. And you know the straw blazes up real fast. And you burn off what we call the pin feathers.
Yeah. That's a dead goose.
Yes, that was we didn't have geese in our own house, but our neighbour had a bloody gander.
Oh, God.
Tell us about ganders.
Oh, tell us about ganders, yes. Well, I was in the 70s and I went to my nephew's house. And I said, you have a lot of geese. He said, yeah, they're in there. And I went into the shed, quite a big shed. And this gander came and I thought, get away. The next thing was, through my trousers, he took a lump out of my shin and it took weeks for the things to heal.
Oh, they were desperate ganders.
Vicious.
Yes, they were. And he has got a gander story.
His wife.
My friend always, anytime we're leaving his house, he'd get up to see you out, and his expression is, I'll see you past the gander.
Yes. That's it. I see you past the gander.
But they were better than any alarm bell.
They were.
Security. Oh,
They were.
yes.
And in fact, there's a cathedral in Barcelona that still keeps a flock of geese in the cloister because they had them as warning during some time of trial, possibly wars or whatever, but they saved them from extinction. They are ready, but ganders are lethal. Oh, lethal. We didn't have them, as I said, but 2 doors up, my neighbours had geese, and I had to pass the house to go to school every day, and that bloody gander used to lie in wait. Anyway, I wonder where that phrase came from. What sauce for the goose? I wonder where that came from.
That's equality.
What's your first memory?
Oh, my first memory. I think coming to the ice show in a horse and trap. In a horse and trap to the agricultural show. I mean, you had so many things, you know.
And it was a big day out.
Yes, well, there was little ice shows. It's a big day out, I mean, but it was that, and I think it was the stalls, you know, the advertising, you know, they were all trying to upstage each other. And the public address, you know, the man of the public address, in a very distinctive voice.
Yes.
Paddy Flynn was his name from Milltown, you know, probably the Clare and then there was the people selling the ice cream, which ice cream was
a treat.
They had no fridges, I said, they only had them in buckets, or they had, you know.
I don't know if any of you heard about Kruger Cameron, who had a pub back in Dunquin. Now the stories about Kruger are legion, and some of them are true and some of them are not, and some of them you wouldn't know which. But one time Kruger went to town and bought ice cream. But of course he had no electricity, so he had no refrigeration. So when he got home, he put the ice cream in a bucket and he sold it by the cup. And people actually paid a penny for a cup of melted ice cream. He did worse things. He had a government contract, a county council contract, to repair a road on the Basket Islands. And the Basket Islands have always been renowned for being inaccessible. So Kruger had several people on his payroll who were long dead. He was just a character. And actually, then you are recording local history. That's another area that should be looked at. The characters in various parishes. Every parish had a character or two. I mean, we have to say, there was a guy called Mike Long. Lord mercy, he's not long dead. But Mike Long was on the dole for an inordinate length of time, even for the farmers. So, you know, it was a very, very long time that he was on the dole. And eventually, the council said, okay, you have to go to work. And he was put to work on the restoration of Doonlow, which is a promontory fort, a bit like Doonangus in Ireland, falling right into the sea. And Michael was well able for the council because he went in, took one look and lay down and said, oh my head, I have a reel in my head. On the foot of his health, he was released from his obligations. And he got his dole and continued. And people like that should be recorded. There are hundreds of stories, not hundreds. But you should record it for the crack of it because they're wonderful people. Those people, they really are. Now, who else would have a good first memory? Van Cork, what's your first memory?
Mine only came about a couple of years ago. It's less of a memory and more of a sense of something. I remember asking my mother, my parents ran pubs in England for a few years. We were all born there. And my mother asked me, she goes, do you remember any of the pubs we were in? And I'm like, no recollection. I said, all I remember is a very steep hill. And that was it. Couldn't picture buildings on it. I just had the sense of a very steep hill. And she just started smiling and she said, when you were born, that was the route I walked every day to get you off to sleep. It was by Windmill Studios. They lived in Crouch End, so it was near where the BTs had the recording studio. And she goes, I walked there and I walked to the top of that hill every day. And I got to the top, I came right back down. But I was between 3 and 12 months. But I can't picture it.
No,
I only remember a steep hill. Yeah, I only feel it. Yeah, exactly. So that would probably be the areas.
Sometimes when you want, are there genuine memories? I little bits in you, I have a kind of sense of something, and I remember bits of it. But because everyone has retold you over the years about it, it feels real. You know, these are true stories about me, and sometimes they're a bit embarrassing. But I do remember sort of being in trouble. It's like Kate maybe, but I only have a bit of a sense of doing it. My father was deharding calves, and I obviously had watched the caustic videos on them, and I was doing it to my sister and myself. But we were I'd have ruined the place. We were just caught in the nick of time. And I remember
to look for the scars.
no words anyway. Yeah, you know, but I don't know fully is it true. And another story is told about me that I started school. I was told in infants, but I would imagine, you know, sometimes in past. Children started in May or June, went a bit before in summer. And on my first day there, I heard my father passing with cattle, and suddenly I ran out and followed him. And he I was crying and he brought me home. And then I didn't come back to school, they tell me for 6 months. But I gather I came back in September. So I don't know, sometimes I'm much shorter in them.
Yes.
Or is it sort of out the years people tell them?
But you know what? It kind of doesn't matter.
Yeah, it doesn't, I suppose.
It doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
I mean, how many of you remember trying to fly? Did any of you try to fly?
Yes.
Who did? I did too.
Yeah.
I did too. And my earliest memory is standing in the kitchen, the first house we lived in. My parents were building the house with my parents. But I remember standing in that kitchen, and I cannot have been 3 because we left the house. But I remember telling my mother that I could nearly fly.
Was it ecstasy around in
Well, I did better than that. I went to the top of the hill at the back of the house, and there was a huge rock, and I used to stand on the rock and jump and go and fly out the next.
Yes, but I used to stand on a very high wall and try, and I was convinced that I would one of these days make it. Why wouldn't I? And I saw ahead.
The birds fly, so
Anyway, another thing that we all have are memories that we got for people who went before us. At my age now, to my very great pleasure, and you would have the same thing, I know 5 generations of families. And it wouldn't be extraordinary if I knew 6. Now, if you think about it, Say in your own family,
8.
you know 8 generations. See, now how much is
I didn't know, I mean, my great, I just know of those.
Yes, yes. Well, I can go back 7 generations, but I actually knew 5 generations of some families eventually, and you would too.
Yeah.
And you might know 6. It wouldn't be very difficult. It wouldn't be impossible to know 6. But it commonly you know 5. For example, somebody, say 60-ish, you might remember their father and their grandfather. And you might know their son and their grandson. And that's 5 generations.
Yeah.
You know, so you could quite easily, in one human being's life, encompass 5 generations. That's amazing to think of. So, some of the memories, now I'd like you to listen. Catherine Talty?
Now, I referred earlier to my grandmother, whose name was Hannah Tuberty. She was, of course, born in the mid-1800s and had been, she described going to what she called the H school, although it wasn't. In her case, I think they were allowed into a local farmhouse. She never actually described who the teacher was, where he came from or anything. But several times she described how it seems a little pig, a young piglet, wandered in to the kitchen where they were sitting, and she took a swipe at the poor little pig and broke its leg. And I think that really bothered her. But anyhow, she said she wore what was called a tally stick. It seems, of course, her parents were native Irish speakers, and I suppose up to the time she went to school, couldn't speak a word of English, but she was being taught to speak English. And the reason that, well, this was, I understood, this was her explanation of it anyhow, was this piece of wood would be suspended around her neck. And when she went home, if he spoke a word in English, the parents would put a little notch on that stick. And then the teacher would look at the stick next day and she'd get slapped if she had spoken a word of Irish, maybe a mistake. If she had spoken a word of Irish at home, she'd get slapped.
Now that's one.
No, that was her story.
Now we just stop that there for a minute. And that's one element of Catherine Talty's story. And it's a very interesting one, isn't it? Because we always thought that the tally stick was used by the teacher, and then you were slapped according to the number of times there were tallies on the stick. But that's an interesting reflection that the parents collaborated.
Yeah.
That's an interesting reflection. And you see, there were good and sound arguments why they should. Because everybody wants their children to do better than themselves and to progress in the world. And the way to progress is to have command of English. And so I can well understand the parents would collaborate.
But indeed, I remember I was good in Irish in school, and I liked the language very much, and I still do. And Stella, although she thinks she's interested in Irish also. But at home, they would say, sure, that Irish is no good to you. You'll have to leave the country. You'll have to go abroad to America or Canada or somewhere. Irish is no good. You should be studying something else. And I always thought it was a peculiar attitude, because as a child I thought it was a peculiar attitude because I loved the sound of the words. And the language and the grammar came easily to me.
Yes, and you see, you're right, and so were parents. Everybody was right in this situation. Of course language is learning, of course it is. And of course it's worth our while having the language that's traditional to us. But it's also That's the long and short of what we actually do. And if there's a particular path that we can see will lead them to do well, that's where we lead them. In modern Ireland, when we taught Irish and when we were free to teach Irish, God knows we didn't do it very well because kids go to school for 14 years. Everybody in this room probably went to school for 14 years, and very few of you can actually speak Irish, and that's the truth. What are we doing wrong? Why are we doing this? Why are we spending money turning people off? And that's really what we're doing. I haven't possibly banned Irish, everybody would be speaking it within 2 years. But it's true, we've done this really, really badly. And it's not a difficult language, actually. It really isn't. When you think now of the diversity of population we have here, the Slavic languages are incredibly difficult. They have any God's number of tenses and cases and inflections and all sorts of things. People learn them all the time. But we made pigs not being teaching Irish in my view. Anyway.
Learning a second language or a third language helps you to understand better all languages.
Yes, but it's even better if it's taught properly.
Exactly. I didn't want to say that. There's a big debate about...
we won't go there because we don't get killed.
Yeah, are kids being trained or are they being educated?
There you go. We won't go there at all. Another nice, but we want everybody's blood pressure to be severely elevated. We go over that. Now we can go on because Mary Talty then talks about, Catherine Talty then talks about the famine.
No, I referred earlier to my grandmother, whose name was Hannah Tuberty. She was, of course, born in the mid-1800s, of course, born maybe I made a mistake. If she had spoken a word badly enough, she never had much to say about the famine years. Although, of course, she was actually born, I think, around 1855 or that way. The only thing, she remembered a story being told by two of her aunts, also Tuberties, growing up when they lived in the just next door to where she was reared. And how very poor people actually dying with hunger in the neighborhood. That when the wheat that their father was growing, when it became ripe, that they'd steal out in the early hours of the morning with their reaping hook and steal a few bunches of cut a few bunches of the wheat and give it to these poor people. That was her story. That was about the only story she told about the famine years.
But wait.
And then here at home, the people that the neighbours that like my granduncle and his first cousin that used to come here almost daily, they never really talked very much at all or hardly anything about very few stories about the famine years. It's strange to say, I suppose they wanted to forget it, but the man next door, no, he didn't tell the story, but was widely known. It seems the farm where I'm living and the farm next door, of course, were all one at one time and have been divided, and between two sisters. Actually, it was divided over 4 portions, I suppose between maybe up to something like 400 acres or something and all, but anyhow, okay. sister next door was inherited the farm next door, had married a man by the name of Tom Murphy, who came from a place called Knock, which of course was down near the Shannon, miles and miles and miles away. And I know that he was here in 1855 because I have a copy of the census that were taken, or not the census, but the Griffith valuation of 1855, and his name appears in it as being the tenant next door. But it seems he ran away down to Knocknagowan anyhow, whether it was 1855 or 56, and when I suppose when the hungry time set in, and was away for 2 years. And in the meantime, his wife, who was known as Matilda Harton, or known locally as Matty, she, with the help of a few neighbours that were, depending on, I suppose, what they earned, she divided the food with them, in other words, and they helped her grow it. The potatoes were plenty.
So, those are the stories of the family now seem to me to illustrate something that I believe. I believe that the reason there are no stories of the family is survivor guilt. Those of us whose families survived, all of us here whose families survived, had to make rough decisions. Really rough decisions. Because the people who died were the cottage class. They had no money. They had no way of going. And if you had just enough to keep your own family alive until the next harvest, and the guy down at the bottom of the road in a little quarter of an acre, his family was dying, what were you going to do? If you helped him, you would all die. Everybody would die. So I think rough decisions.
But there were big families as well, so you did a lot of food to give help.
Yes. And you couldn't, because you probably had a big family, Well, you all die.
Oh, 14 or 15 or 16 children.
Absolutely. But there is the technology is not helping us here. But I have a tape from Ventry, where people are talking about stories where the dogs were running on the roads with human limbs in their mouths. Where farm villages where entire households of 14 or 15 people, exactly as you said, died. And the house fell down on top of them. They were never buried. There was nobody to bury them. So I really do think that it is survivor guilt. But when it passed, people said, we did what we had to do. Which is what Nancy said after the war. But, we did what we had to do. And so that's how people survive. And I think it was such a truly terrible experience that no virtue was seen in passing it on. It didn't go into the folklore. And down in Dingle, we remember Walter Raleigh coming through when he came to Dunamore in 1589. There's still very still stories about Walter Raleigh. Very few about the family. But that story from the grounds. The guys who said that.
Sorry, can I just ask you, I mean, when you went to school, what were you taught about the family?
Well,
English poems or poems?
Well, the English didn't cause the potato. The potato plant just came. But what had happened had been that the population had increased inordinately on the foot of Raleigh, actually, because he brought the potatoes. And because potatoes were a cheap staple, families were bigger and bigger and the population grew larger and larger. And when the potato plant came, a large section of the population was without food. And what we were taught at school was kind of, it was vague, wasn't it? We were just told that loads of people died. And there was no food, and it was the potato blight, and that was that. We didn't particularly believe in it, did we, in school? We did to this extent. Corn was grown and sold to pay the rent to landlords who were rich.
And it was exported, we were told that it was exported from the docks in Clare and from Cuimhneamh. The corn that was grown in West Clare, that's what happened to us. I spent 50 years in England. I'm very grateful to it. For me.
They didn't do much for the family though.
But that's what we were told.
Oh yes, that is what we were told, and they didn't do much. On the other hand, you know what? It's very hard to judge any period in the light of another period. It's very hard for us to say what was good, bad, or indifferent about that time. It's far better to look at it and say that's what happened. And that's what
it was in England at that time, and we were taught English history.
Did you know anything about the Irish family?
We were taught that yes, we were.
And Irish nuns.
Oh, yeah.
No,
actually, we had good English teachers, and they were very balanced.
Yes.
But I mean, what I'm saying is, at that time in England, there were tenant farmers and people starved. There were none
even in England
as well. But at the end of the day, the tenants do get the land.
Well, yes, but of course, what you have to remember too is that the Catholics in the north of England were persecuted because they held on to the faith, and in the south of England they got away with, they took the equivalent of the soup that was taken here. You know about the bowl of soup?
Do you know what?
The bowl of soup.
The soup is a fascinating subject, and really that's a place to get into stories, because how many of you know of a place where the soup was made? How many of you can locate places where the soup was
workhouse in Kilrush. The workhouse in Kilrush.
The workhouse was a different matter. They might have made soup, but the workhouse was dependent on any hand, really.
No, tennis where the soup was made.
Or was it? In Bellitry. The soup was made in the rectory. And it was a huge vat. And at that time there was a huge evangelistic move among Protestants. And they had come over to try to teach us the error of our ways, which were marginally different from theirs. You know, the difference is different. There's no difference, really. Both, isn't it astonishing to think the amount of hoo-ha there was between Christian sects about what was right and what was wrong? Now, if you're teaching, you're glad if they know about Christianity at all.
Yeah.
Never mind the denomination of it, because it's kind of gone. All shapes and forms of it is kind of gone. But anyway, there was an evangelistic movement, and they had founded a college in Bellitry to train teachers who were to teach to the medium of Irish. Because they decided there was no use trying the east of the country, but they would try the west. So there was come up here to Clare, Galway, Mayo, all the Irish-speaking places, and the college to train these people was invented.
Well, they were Plymouth Brethren, I think, Protestants. Plymouth Brethren, or Brotherhood, Plymouth Brotherhood. They still exist as religious. And they built the first school in Carmurphy. The money came down to
There you go, and that would be the same thing. They started with the Cuimhneamh Place Society.
Yeah.
And they built the first school in the Glasgow Highlands.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, I think they're to blame for Peg Stairs. and being on them because they taught literacy for the first time. And these people started to write, which was lot of people for many generations afterwards. Anyway, I remember as a young woman, because I was born into that community, I didn't realise that the Inornach was being studied really as a language text and as a source for vocabulary and all that kind of thing. And it was on my course in university. And when I did my oral exam, the lecturer asked me what I thought of An, expected me to say this was the most wonderful book. And, you know, and I said, I think it's the most boring thing I've ever read. And he said, what? I said, well, it's not with skulls and there's lobsters. Because every single chapter, if you read it, it's there's spuds and there's lobsters, or there's both. Okay, the language would probably have been great to somebody who didn't speak it, but I spoke it. And I knew all those words anyway, and I didn't need to be reading about spuds and lobsters for several hours. So I remember looking and saying, it's the most unusual point to me. I think that's down to the Protestants. They founded the first school in the Blasters. And it is thought that that was what led to the whole sort of literary revival, you might say, in the Blasters. But there are, you know, it will be known where the soup was, it will. Anyway, to go on from there, my own family in West Kerry are known as the Parnelli, because we were Parnellites, and there's a long story as to how we got the name, and the family is extremely proud of it. So if you're ever doing anything, have a look and see why people are called that. We had also had a guy called Tom Dyke, and you can figure out why that was. He was in the gold rush. His grandson married my aunt, but it didn't do me any good. He apparently did well out of the gold rush, but as I say, I couldn't vouch for that, because it didn't do me any good. We had the Kaiser, various other names like that. Anyway, I want to go from that now to school. I was going to do a good bit about school, but technology has gone against us. So I'll just ask you, how many of you had good experiences at school, and how many of you have bad? What was it like when you were a little girl?
Nice. I had a very good school, and the teachers were kind.
Were they?
Yeah.
Was that normal?
Maybe it was because I was a good pupil. Because I would say there were children in the school who wouldn't have the same story.
Do you know that I have to say I had exactly the same experience? None of my teachers, to my recollection, ever laid a finger on me. But I have seen children brutally beaten. Brutally beaten. And when I did the men of entry, this is just to help you if you're talking to people. Ask them what school was like. You see, if I judge you correctly, everybody in this room did fairly well out of school. Do you know? You did okay in that. And if you do fairly well out of school, the brutality fades. Do you know what I mean? You'd be like Mary, it's like me. You go. Go on, tell us.
I didn't like school.
Well, good luck.
I didn't like it because my experience in school wasn't good. And I left school early because of that experience. And that's not true now. But I hear so many stories from people about their school days these times. I know that there's one school that was still a school teacher, and she was nearly 100 at this stage. And there are people that love to string her up this minute if they got her because of their treatment. I think it's bad to get a wallop to be insulted with horse. You know, I always did. But I saw that go on, and I saw it even in secondary school, which was even worse. But I'd imagine the older people had worse experiences. I remember my father telling a story about his time in school. That Master Airy was the principal. You know, it's a strange name, Airy, but he must have done something to my father But my grandfather wasn't the sort of man who'd take anything lying down, and he arrived into the school with an ash plant. and he told the teacher and master where to go. But the next visit my father had that evening was from the parish priest.
Yes,
So my grandfather never went to mass after that event. Never saw inside the church when he was buried.
And so how religious were you?
Just Christian, I suppose.
Of a sort.
But I do feel that's another story.
I know it is another story. But it's also interesting because this is very interesting to me because my own grandfather had the same story. He never went to church, chapel, or meetings. And I think it was because his wife died in childbirth. When his children, he had 6 children, including the child who was born when about that. Very young. The eldest one was about 6, as it would have been at the time. And I have a feeling that the priest had a misfortune to tell him that it was the will of God. I have a feeling
That was the usual.
yes, that might have happened.
God wanted him.
I think so, and I think my grandfather might have said, well, God can do for himself so.
Yes.
And when he was old, he was very old when he died. And he threatened to die several times before he actually did. And the priest would be sent for because that was a matter of routine. But as soon as the priest set foot in the room, the outfit arrived. Bellow! Until the priest fled, shaking holy water behind him as he left. So that wasn't entirely unusual. The people did stand up. Not everybody did. The community in general didn't. But not everybody.
I suppose if you want to look back at it, the priest and the teachers demanded respect.
Yes, and that's exactly the word.
They
thought they were above. They thought they were above.
I don't know, and that's all.
But they really did think they were above criticism. You know, I mean, I was a teacher, you were a teacher. I think teachers are wonderful people, on the whole. But when you go back, and one of my men, the piece I wanted to show you, I have a very, very powerful piece in the Medical There's about 15 minutes of people talking about their experiences in school. Now, there's balance. Obviously, people have very good experiences. I'll give you an example. One guy said that their teacher was an alcoholic. He'd come in every day, or almost every day, drunk, and he would lay about them. He took the leg of a chair. Now, it wasn't a delicate, fragile leg like that. It was a great, big, square block of timber. And he hit this man, and he split the side of his head up, right up. And nothing happened. Nothing happened. The thing that really made me think was that 70 years later, these men were still hurt. You know, they were still hurt. They hadn't done well at school. And so they had never gone on, and the memory was still vivid.
And the ones who, the parents who did object, at least in my area, the ones who did object, the parents who really stood out against that kind of brutality, were labelled. And they were singled out like this. They were outcasts. They were different.
I had 2 experiences in school. In the junior classroom, the two teachers. Mrs. Conway took the juniors up to including third class. She was a brilliant teacher, and she prepared us because she knew she had to give us what we wouldn't get in the big classroom when we dealt with the master. Master was cruel. I never got a slap from Mrs. Conway. He never touched me because I always knew my lessons. But he was cruel to some boys and some girls. And that's still.
It is. I think sometimes like that too. We had a child at school. Lord bless us. I won't mention his name because actually you might know him. I think he lives in Limerick now. But he was what you might call 11th and Satan. He wasn't quite the full ship. And he lived only down the road from the school. But if he was 11pence, 8pence, his mother was 9pence. Do you know what I mean? And she never got him to school in time. You know, oh, she was not full. But anyway, she just never got him to school in time. And it wasn't the child's fault. It's never a child's fault if they're late. It really isn't. But I remember he was in the junior part of the school, and I was in with the master. And one day his teacher got fed up, the way teachers do, and she sent him into the master. And the master took him and sat him on his desk. Now this child was about maybe 6. And he whack, 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 with his whole strength. And I still feel what you feel. I remember thinking, that child is not right in the head. And look what he's doing to him. One of the things I think, and I don't know if you agree with this, teaching is a vocation. If you have it, you love it. I did it for over 30 years, and I loved it. Every day I was spent out. But in those days, there was a system. They were trying to get people with good Irish into the schools so that Irish would be well taught, a thing in which they were remarkably unsuccessful. But they did do that. And so they got children from the Belfast, and they gave them a scholarship at the age of maybe 12 to go into what they called the preparatory colleges. Were you in one? No. And they put them into the preparatory colleges, which was a kind of a fast track to teaching. You then didn't have to do as well in your leaving cert. You were sort of tracked straight through into the training colleges. Now, that was fine. It gave an opportunity to many poor children who otherwise wouldn't have got it to get a second level education. But it also attracted a whole lot of people who were unfit to be teachers, didn't it? And I think that's a lot of it. That there wasn't much available to people at the time, and people were trapped into teaching who should never have them. Never. However, one of the stories in the film, the Benevento, one of the stories that would be great satisfaction, this little boy, and he'd be maybe your age now, he's not, he's by no means getting on years. And he said, and it was really so sad, he said, he was the youngest of the family, and he said the day he went to school for the first time, he was jumping with delight, walking down the road with the rest of his family, because he was a big boy, he was delighted. And he soon learned his mistake. And he had a dreadful time in primary school and in secondary school, equally bad time. And coming up to what was probably the intercert. Did you know the intercert? I don't know, maybe it was German. I don't know. Anyway, he was coming up to his intercert. And he could not handle Latin. He spoke Irish as a native, he was okay at English. You could neither read nor write in Latin, he couldn't make any handouts. It had never occurred to him that he probably had a bad teacher. But we won't go there either. And he couldn't do it. So he never had his homework done because he hadn't a clue. And one day the teacher asked him if he had his homework done, and he said, no. And he was asked why, and he said, because I can't. And the teacher drew out and hit him with his fist in the ear. But this was no little boy. And he had had enough. He had been beaten every day since he came to school. And he had had enough. And he drew out and hit him back. And put him sitting on his backside under the blackboard. And he didn't have my last day at school. But I was delighted with it. Do you know, I thought I was delighted with it. Well, fair play. Proper order too.
I saw that.
Huh?
I saw that.
Did you?
And it was a priest of it.
That's right.
I'm conscious of time, like we're still in national school and looking at the record for here. I'm wondering, will we go on maybe, you know, because we can talk about schools.
Yeah, we better hop. We better hop. Now, I'm going to talk about significant events for 2 minutes because I just want to refer to it as a theme because it's important. I know where he wants to get to. Significant events will vary according to the place. The one I was using as an example here was a tsunami that hit Dingle in 1942. I want to ask you a question. Somebody said there earlier, somebody mentioned the word fecal. Would you say fecal or fatal? It's fecal.
Fecal.
Why is it fecal? Fecal.
If they were from fake, they're from fake.
Fecal.
It's anglicised. Posh.
Remember the big conference with the IRA in
There's a man who was that 2 weeks ago. I met a man who was.
Oh, did you?
I met a man recently. There was a
Well, I remember seeing and hearing everybody on the radio television talking about fecal. It can't be, it has to be fecal. And is it? I mean, is it properly speaking? Where are you from? Fecal. And do people in fecal say fecal? That's great. It's the same. Do you know what I mean? Anyway, never mind. The significant event I was going to talk about was the tsunami. A tsunami hit England in 1942. And it's a wonderful example of the collection of oral history. Because if you talk to different people, they had different experiences of this tsunami, and you can put it all together, and it really was a tsunami. And it came right over a peninsula that was over 130 feet over the sea. It was a big, big tsunami. It's a very good thing. It probably hit way out at that point. Cuimhneamh, whatever that is. What do you call that? Loophead? Yeah. And that's one. Another significant event that really should be taught about in oral history is emigration. How many people here emigrated themselves for any length of time? See? Emigration is huge. Cormac is a returner. Do you know, it's a huge thing, emigration, and we should require it. I was talking to people in America, and I said to them, what did you put in the suitcase? What was in the suitcase? And it was very funny, and I actually have in the book, I have the suitcase. One man had the suitcase in his attic. And when you open it, inside the lid was stuck a holy picture of his sister. And stuck on, 56 years ago, before he left for America the first time. Diseases. I have a beautiful piece of The Death of a Child. If we have time to show it at the end, I will. But again, in those days, the death of a child wasn't planted at all. There was no ceremony to bury a child. None. A miscarriage wasn't even thought of. It was just get on with it. And I have the most beautiful piece from a woman who was a teacher, born in Galway, not so far from here, about the loss of one of the...
Just asking.
What do you mean they wasn't recognised? So babies once they were born, they're kind of baptised.
They're probably baptised, and that would be very important.
If they weren't baptised, they're very, very sorry, if they weren't baptised, they would be very.
Well, yes, I mean, you know, it was more important that they were baptised so that they would get into heaven, because if they weren't baptised, they would get into heaven, they would go to limbo. And limbo was a kind of an unknown sort of a place, and it would be better if they didn't go there.
You're talking about a baby?
A baby, a neonatal death was ignored. There was no funeral, there was no ritual, there was no ceremony. You bury the child yourself, wherever you liked. Oh, sure they were. Their families missed them. Their mothers missed them. The Calumas were for unbaptized children, and they were separated out of places.
But I did give them around England.
They're everywhere.
Brenda, they were called
Killeen, or we call them Caluma. The same thing.
one bar. No, what was the one that was treated? They must have been
Oh, yes, the people knew them, but there was no ceremony. You understand?
But there wasn't a ceremony of the women.
That was after all childbirth. You didn't have to lose the child. You were considered unclean after the birth of the child.
But that goes back back to the water again and the importance of, coming from the river and the sea, because there is the breaking the water at birth, and then after that, and then women would be anointed and blessed with holy water, and then there would be the baptism, the cleansing again of the child of original sin, and then there would be the church, it was called, and a woman could not go into another house or a shop in the village or anywhere until she was first cleansed by the priest, by a man.
Yes, that is absolutely true. It is so ludicrous.
Why did the man came on the
I suppose that a man had so little to do with the entire reproductive process that he really said he had to get his nose in somewhere.
Now I've filled it up for you.
Excuse me. But in fact, that whole business of cleansing leads me nicely into the topic that my friend wants to get to. Because the time of childbirth was actually regarded as a very interesting and magical time. And in fact, it is. As everybody in this room who has a child knows, it is a magical time. But magic is both good and bad. And women, after childbirth, in my neck of the woods, were considered very vulnerable to the spirit world. It was thought that the fairies could take either a woman or a very small child very easily. And if they did, they left another being behind, a different being. If the child was the changeling, the little being in the cot was a shifra. And I hear people now calling their children shifra, and I say, oh my God, is that only you? Oh my God, the child. But they do. Well, it is one of the commonest names. But that's the shifra.
What's the meaning of the shifra?
The shifra is a changeling left by the fairies. The little child has been taken and there's
Something else left.
something else left, another being.
Lesser being, lesser being.
Well, a different being. But I tell you this, I apologize, but that is, I wonder if did it happen here?
Never heard of it.
Never heard of it.
You had an account, but I've lost the thread.
Okay, sorry. The woman was very vulnerable, and so was the child. And either one could easily be taken by the fairies. And fairies could be any kind of spirit, but they could be taken by her and a changeling left in their place. The child changeling was a shifra, the adult changeling was an irish.
What's it?
Irish. This is in an Irish-speaking environment. And the way, this is really curious. If you were leaving the house where there was a very small baby, in those days they used to have tongs made in the smithy, big.
Right.
I've seen them, they're big. Yokes. And they open the tongs over the cot, over the cradle. Because if you opened the iron tongs over the cradle, the iron protected the child. And the woman, well, if you thought the woman was a changeling or an Irish, what you would do was you would light a big fire. And you would offer to burn her. At which time the fairy would vanish and the real woman would come back. And not all that long ago, over 100 years ago, but not all that long ago, that happened to a woman somewhere in Tipperary. There's a book written about it. It's called The Burning of Bridget Tears. Yeah, The Burning of Bridget Tears.
That goes back to biblical times to Moses.
Does it?
Yeah.
It goes back to the burning in the bush. Moses
There's a difference between the bush and your wife.
He was burning his son.
No, that was Abram who was going to sacrifice Isaac.
Was the woman in Brenda Gordon?
Sorry?
Was she Gordon?
Oh, she's
Oh,
actually.
Mrs. Jerry Godford.
Yes.
Yes, she was.
They
Yes.
forgot the bit about offerings burning.
They forgot to be
They forgot the bit about offerings burning.
Oh, it wasn't an offer, no. She was, I mean, they offered to burn her and she didn't change. So they truly burnt her.
But what were the symptoms of being
I think there were two things.
Yeah.
First of all, babies were often fed with cow's milk. Breastfeeding wasn't as common as we might think. Babies were often fed with cow's milk. And children can easily be allergic to cow's milk. And if they didn't thrive, you know, they were breastfed for a while they were thriving, then they would change to cow's milk. And all of a sudden they stopped thriving. So what would stop them thriving? Clearly they had been taken by fairies. And honestly, that's no problem. And also, postnatal depression can change personality quite substantially. And again, because they didn't have the knowledge, clearly she was taken by the fairies. What?
Getting on with your life.
There's a whole, you can go on about that too for a good long week. So, let's go on to all this business about magic and fairies and spirits and the things that happen. See, we're very curious kind of people, yeah, really. We can be very compliant with the things that are required of us. But parallel to that, we think our own thoughts. Do you know? Would you agree with me?
Good example here.
Yeah, see, yeah, we do. And you know what they say in the old gods time? Well, we haven't quite abandoned the old gods. We have not quite abandoned the old gods. And quite properly, I mean, we say in my own parish, the patron is St. Catherine. Now, I've looked into St. Catherine, and as far as I can gather, she wasn't a saint at all. I don't think she probably never existed. But there was a goddess who, when Christianity came to the Middle East, was renegotiated as St. Catherine. And I think that St. Catherine said, you think, don't get rid of me. I'm around, and here I am, and I'm saying, and there she is as St. Catherine. And there are a whole lot of things like that. I say, all these holy wells that we have, they're long before Christianity. Long before Christianity.
But you and I've heard stories in our house, you know, when people were dying, they said, oh, we saw lights. We knew that he was going, the lights came, yeah. And in the case of the mothers who lost their babies, yes, the spirits came, and the lights were seen.
What?
The lights were seen, or they were supposed to have seen lights.
Well, one of my women
That was
said,
imagination.
well, why would it be imagination?
Well, yes.
Why would it be? I mean, go back, say 200 years. See that look there? You'd be burned for a witch.
Yeah.
And if you produce one of those things 200 years ago.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So there's a whole lot of things we don't know. All those things we don't know. And we might find them out. I mean, if it happens, it can be understood. But we don't understand it yet. I'm not wondered.
What do you think of Peg Sayers on you? I know you mentioned her earlier. What do you think of the storytelling of her time?
She was a great storyteller. She was a great storyteller. She should never have been inflicted on generations of Irish schoolchildren because it was most unfavorable to her and to them. But she was a fabulous storyteller. She was a bit of a mould in the book. In reality, she wasn't at all. She was a very positive
There was
woman.
negativity and depth.
Yeah, it was the editing. It was the editing. And you see, when you're very old, a lot of the stories you have are to do with them, because I was at a dinner party recently, and I'm not all that old, and we were talking about, I was at a dinner party with people that I had known maybe when I was about 20. And we said, do you remember so-and-so? Dead. And so-and-so, dead. And I thought, Jesus, they were all dead. Do you know what I mean? So people tell these stories, there's going to be a fair bit of death in them.
Yeah.
They really just will. She'd lost her husband, she'd lost a child, several people in the village had drowned. And these are dramatic times. So when you're telling your story, you will tell the dramatic times. So yes, I really like Peg. I liked her much better than the Alana. Isn't it funny? Because she told stories that I could relate to. You know, she told stories about feelings and things like that. I liked her. But anyway, she was a great one for cooking and yoga. But one of the women that I was speaking to saw a light on her father's head and her mother's head. Same kind of light. Did she really? I don't know. But I wouldn't deny the possibility. I don't know. I never saw anything. I never heard it. But I don't deny that it's possible with other people. Right? How would I know?
So little we know.
There's so little. No, I just don't know. But anyway, I want you to listen to John Hastings and then Sean O'Halloran.
But did you ever tell the coach of Bow? No. The coach of Bow.
What's that?
Was in a few places. It was a kind of a train, an enchanted train that came along, and there was buckles and cans and saucepans and rattling inside it. But when I was a young fella, there was a place down in Mahon, and he used to pass that way. And I went with my father and a young fella, and to the around the 1:15 when it came, and all this rattling and tins and saucepans and everything.
Did you see it?
I didn't even want to see it at all, but you heard the racket. But I said to my father I didn't want to hear it anymore.
Was that a sign of somebody dying?
Well, it didn't say, like, you know, I don't remember to say anything like that about it. But it passed that way at a certain time, around 1 o'clock around.
That must have been quite frightening.
Yeah.
And what about any fairies?
Okay, so that was Sean O'Halloran and Coach Power. Now the funny thing is, I can tell you we have a Coach Ballot. It's the same thing, it's Coach Ballot.
One was deaf and the other one was
dumb. So it was clearly a communicative coach. But for us, it did come. It was coming to take somebody away. But it came for the young women, for the women after childbirth. The coach came and could be heard coming to the door. And one woman said that the girl in the house was asleep and couldn't be woken, that she was in some sort of trance. But her mother did succeed in waking her. Now, I might show it, but anyway, she dealt with it. What are the magic stories around here? What kind of fairies do you have? Did anybody ever have what you might call a paranormal experience? Did early? Yes.
There's a Biddy Early's, the roof of her house is out there past week. It was just found in the village, and the stories are around. Nobody could ever do the house up or renovate it. It's still out there. People go in and they leave items of shoes or just different, you know, that they leave different bits and pieces in there. Hanging up. I don't know what that's about. It's like relics that are left there by people that go into the house. Maybe it's that nothing might happen to them when they leave. I don't know. I know some girls would have left a shoe.
Do you ever see her do anything?
A video,
No, when?
When I heard all the stories my father told me, it frightened the life out of me.
Tell us.
He used to be talking about his father and Father O'D in Killanena. And Father O'D telling him it was bad enough being called out to the funeral in the night. They got up to the wake and up to bless their night. The man were meeting the people who buried the week before coming again. And that sort of stuff, and when you walk up down there to our house, it's quite old avenue when you'd be young and you'd be kind of begin to look behind you and see what's around. Now, the island lights in Crusheen My mother and my grandmother-in-law, then when she was 103 when she died, they believed firmly in that.
And what was that?
When somebody died, the lights come on the island out in Katrina there, and they still stick by that. A lot of the older people. I'm not quite sure. Sure, God, I have people talking about fairies. Whatever fairies were. Fairies were sort of mythical people that lived amongst us. I'd be going up there with you, and I still say that pass you by. You meet anyone passing you by, I still say that to you. I'm trying to frighten him, like. Because people said to me, they're out tonight. That sort of thing, and you kind of wonder to yourself. and you will be looking at me, you'd be afraid to walk up the avenue, like.
There you go.
Because of the sort of stories that were carried on. And we heard more stories in our house when we were young that put the scare through you, like. There was some people, some characters, and older people in particular, they made a kind of they were the storytellers to tell it. They were riding horses out over mountains, and they were jumping over canals, and it was like the West, the Wild West.
Now, part of where there was a town called Arcamoor, and the fairies used to go through that 3 times a week with a van.
But there were stories that stick in your mind. But my father believed them. But
I say if it was dark enough, you were old enough, you might believe them yourself.
But sure, that's it, we believed them, and we used to laugh at him like this.
Because I'm telling you, the mark of my heels is on the lane going up to our house, where I lived when I was a child. The mark of my heels is on that road I used to run so fast.
Yes.
And I had a neighbour, a young man, who lived 2 fields away, but a long way by road, if you know what I mean. And we used to separate about a mile from my house, and he would have to go one way and I'd go another. And I'd be going ahead of him, and I could hear him running.
Sure, what about the banshee then?
We have the banshee.
Good intro, sorry, I'm talking to
The banshee, well, I've experienced that myself, because a very good friend of ours were killed in the war, and we were making preparations, Paddy Neil and myself. We were now down to Neil's to make an end, as we said, to open the grave and do other things happened the way home. And the next time we came out to a very clear night in October, we came out to the gate, and Paddy and the wife, Paddy and Kitty, came out with me. Next time I thought first it was the town cast, you know the weather started.
Howling.
Yeah. And to over the hill. And kind of the right woman there, and looked at Kitty, she was gracious and more. Did you hear it? She said to me. You know what I said? That's the banshee, she said. I said, no, they said, no, banshee. I know she was frightened. But the next thing was over here. And the next thing was down by the gallery. And I think the rest, that's something there, all right. But she said, that's the second time we've seen you hear that. She said, no, in the last probably so many years before, in such a one died, we had them before, she did the same way.
So was this after the death or before the death?
In fact, it was after the death actually, not before the death, so they were down to it. And that's what the funny thing about it, because I was talking before the death, but it was after.
Could you describe the sound?
I'm not sure. You know, it was going in waves. You know, to raise up and very distant and die down, and then it was here in a different place then again. You know, that was the only thing that convinced me, like, afterwards. But I came home that night and I didn't test it or not at the time. You made it very clever, but when you think of it after, you know, like it turned to something natural anyway. No, the Jack of the Lantern was a different story. The Jack of the...
Danny, have you heard of banshee? No?
Stories.
Lots of stories.
Lots of stories and I heard the banshee.
What?
Lots of stories and I heard the banshee as well.
You did?
I did, yeah.
That's
Cats wailing in the valley that turned out to be. I got this sound like people wailing.
Oh, they do.
But there's not fighting, they sound like people wailing. And the Jack of the Lantern, we had him as well.
Yes.
In the mountain, as you cross the mountain, it's
We had it in the bog. The Jack
in the bog, yes,
in the bog.
and
it was gas.
It would shine all around you, hop about, sparkle about, and they would say, "Oh, cross the running water, and you'll be all right." But of course, when you did, you went into a green field. There's the water again. You see, the water saved you.
Yes, it did.
The water saved you all the time. Yeah.
Do you know the song in Irish?
I'm convinced that Jack of the Lantern was sulfur dioxide. You only saw it in the moonlight, a moonlight night. And Jack of the Lantern came on the moonlight night and he shone. So
I saw it myself, and I didn't think it was that, and it didn't frighten me either. I just didn't know what it was, and I was very small.
Oh, we were scared of it because we talked to Jack of the Lantern. We believed it.
Well, you see, we were told it was Jack of the Lantern, that what Jack of the Lantern was. We were also told.
Oh, they didn't say it. They didn't say it.
They didn't know.
No, it's Jack of the
But
Lantern.
the water is interesting. There are always protections. That's one of them. Crossing running water. And I don't know. There's a song called Brenda, an Irish language song called Brenda, and it is said to have been composed by a man who was being threatened with abduction by a spirit, and he began to sing, which kept the spirit occupied until he crossed the stream, and he knew then that the spirit couldn't pursue him across the stream. That was one. Another was a black-handled knife. That was another protection. Another protection was an ember in your pocket, an ember out of the fire. You brought it with you on your way home. You had one.
Hot?
I don't know. I heard one woman told me a story. The guy was going across the beach with an ember in a canteen, in a little can, apparently. But these stories are so universal. It's not just in Ireland that they occur. They occur right across the world. And when you were saying there that people believe them because they were told, actually I think it's possible that people believe them because we all have a sense that there may be more things possible than we can see. Do you know what I mean? And I think we have that, do you know, that sense. Like in the end, if you believe in God, you have to believe in that kind of magic. Because all these things are happening somewhere.
You know there's a story about the water is down your way. You know that water where people come to drink it for depression?
Yes.
Was they scientifically found out
Yes.
that's what it
Yes.
was high
Yes.
lithium.
Drowning out.
Yeah. So was that originally looked on as magic until they discovered it was lithium?
Yes. Well, it was, you see, they wouldn't have called it magic. They wouldn't simply say that the water had that power.
Yeah.
You know, well, for example, where I live in Dublin, in Rathcoole, there's a cure for shingles. If you get shingles, you go for the cure's blood for shingles. You find somebody of the Kyo family and you visit them, and so they wrap a thread around their finger and they stick a pin in the fingertip and get some blood, and they rub the blood onto the area affected by the shingles. And they do this every day for 3 days, and shingles have pain and itch and rash. And the Kyos will tell you that over the 3 days, first the pain will go, then the rash will go, then the itch will go, or something. I don't know the order. But I do know that a friend of my own, who was 9 months and 2 weeks pregnant, got shingles. And she said, I really can't do this. I can't do both. I can't have a baby and shingles. The shingles were right across the bum. I can't have a baby and shingles simultaneously. It's just too much. And I was teaching locally, and I told her about the Kyos blood. And I said, go to the shot. Won't hurt. And she went to the Kyos, and the shingles went in the 3 days. Now, we also had a woman called Josie Pouch. And Josie Pouch had a cure for thrush. And my own eldest child had very bad thrush. And we had kids. gentian violet. Who remembers gentian violet? Wonderful stuff. However, the child was full of gentian violet, I was full of gentian violet, every garment and piece of furniture in the house had gentian violet, but every time we stopped, there was still thrush. And then somebody told me that Josie Pouch had a cure for thrush because she was a posthumous child. She was born after her father died. And the thing that Josie Pouch did was she blew into the child's mouth. She came every day for 3 days, blew into the child's mouth, said prayers and devotions, and went up. You couldn't pay. This couldn't be paid for. So the thrush went. I'm not joking you. The child was maybe a month old. It can't have been faith healing. The child didn't know pain. She didn't know Josie Pouch for the whole of the wall. Anyway, my child was born, and she got thrush. And this time, I didn't bother with the gentian violet. I said, no, when I go to Josie Pouch. But it wasn't causing any great trouble, and I wasn't pushing. And I was in my sister-in-law's, and I was telling them that the child had thrush and I was going to Josie Pouch. And my sister-in-law's sister said, well, I should have that cure. I was born after my father died. And I said, well, she blew into the child's mouth and we'll see. And she did. One time, no prayers, thrush gone.
They just do one prayer now.
One time, no prayers.
The allele process is only when a formalised, is it? The allele process is only when a formalised.
Father, when you can't be born after
I don't know what the British child was. I think it was kind of fire eater. But he said when he was younger, you get a cure for the burns. If someone suffered burns, that if you licked the belly of the lizard in the bottle, and he said he did it, and then it was about 12 or 13 time, about a month or two later, the neighbour's house went on fire, but the little girl that was in it got very badly burns, just kind of head to toes. It was really, well, probably second-degree burns, and they called for him, and they said to lick the burns, and he said he couldn't bring himself to it. Like they all were convinced he had the cure because he licked the belly of the lizard, but when he saw the neighbour story, he said he just couldn't bring himself to do it.
He should have tried.
But it could.
He should have tried.
My father licked the lizard. My father told us he licked the lizard.
So did you ever try it on bird?
Once, I think, yeah. Maybe a finger, yeah. I think it did, yeah. But then if you take a dog leaf, you know, the dog leaf, put it on a burn.
Oh, really?
Or no, but not on a real burn, no, but on the
metal burn. Yes.
But there's the moons play a huge role, the power of the moons. Oh, the moon, I mean the moon.
Well, you see, all those things. Imagine your husband died when you were pregnant. Imagine that. And there can't be anything more traumatic that leaves you still alive, if you know what I mean. So, of course, bits and pieces of things can go into your bloodstream and into the veins. That might do. You see, it's what we don't know. Do you know what I mean? And because we don't know, we say, oh no, that's not possible. But maybe it is. Maybe it is. I don't know. All I know is that my own two children, at less than a month old, were killed. Yeah.
Well, I think we know so little. I think we know it all.
Possible. And if they're possible, one day we'll understand how. Do you know? We don't understand how now. And because we have made so much progress in the last 50 years, we think we know everything. But you're only starting.
We've lost that sense to do with extra sensitive perception. And I think the cats have that particular skill. And I've had a number of experiences where I've had this sixth sense where I imagined, I felt that things would happen, and they did happen, and one was an accident, and I had visions of that before I left England. I knew that I wouldn't reach home in the car, and just our first oldest child, he was only 3 months, and a van crashed into the lorry first of all, then bounced at the back of a car and head on into us. And I mean, the front of the car was very badly damaged, but we escaped without injuries, fortunately, thank God. And but we were very, very badly shocked. But I had that vision. I had other experiences as well. Still, it is like we talk.
I know, and it's not the place where you talk about everything that person.
Well, it involved family who came with warnings about deaths of my brother, who was very, very young at the time. He was only 56. But she came and she came into the room and with a knife all around her. She was my aunt, and she raised her hand. And my father always said, you know, if you see spirit, don't be afraid. Just keep quiet and don't say anything. And I did. I was sitting up in bed. I said a few prayers, started to sleep, and I pinched my thighs to say, well, are you awake? And are you seeing this? She raised her arm. The alcove of the room opened up, and I was looking into the country kitchen with the open fire in my own home, and I could see the family there. But I could see members of the family who had died as well, and my brother. And the following morning we got the phone call to say that my brother had carcinomatosis all over his body, no hope. He was dead in 3 months. And I admit that. But what happened was, then I turned to her and I said, wake up till you see this. And it just went, it disappeared. And she turned to me and she said, you know what, tomorrow morning I'll have you admitted to the
If she did, they must have let you out. I should have done. Now, we have to draw this to a halt because we've been here a very long time. Now, thank you very much. Thank you very much. And to follow on what you were saying, a lot of what happened here tonight was a kind of intuitive communication, wasn't it?
Yeah.
People got in and thought about it, and thought about their own lives and their own experiences, and what they saw and didn't see. And I enjoyed it. So thank you very much for this.
Thank you.
Thank you.